Greetings and salutations. You are watching Hideshi, the host for today's evening. I'm super excited to have you all here. Excited about the amazing conversation that we have lined up for you. As you all know, this is a talk session about prelims 2020, history analysis and history as an optional subject. So yeah, do ask your burning questions you have with you towards the end in the comment section below. So joining us today is a superwoman and an amazing visionary. And when I say amazing, I mean it, because she is determined to preserve India's historical sites. Today she'll be sharing mains. So yeah, ma'am, if you are watching us, please send a request so that I can add you up.
Hello.
Hello. So guys, let's welcome Ms. Chandrajyoti Singh. Ma'am, it's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Thanks. With pleasure, ma'am. So yeah, before we begin, I would love to acquaint our audience with your achievements so far. Shall I?
Yes, please do.
Thank you, ma'am. So guys, Ms. Chandrajyoti Singh is an IAS officer who secured it in 2019 with an All India rank of 28. That's incredible, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What makes her special is that she cleared this exam merely in one attempt, that too at such a young age of 22, wherein some of us are not even sure what to do next. So yeah, she did it by making self-study as her only mantra, and you'll be surprised to know that she had covered most of her syllabus in only 6 months. That's unbelievable. She calls herself a history buff, and indeed she is. So yeah, ma'am, you're not only an officer, but a true inspiration for the young generation. We are extremely happy to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
Okay, pleasure, ma'am. So let us begin with our session.
Right.
Yeah, to begin with, ma'am, when did you actually think of becoming an IAS? And how was your journey from the IAS form to an IAS officer?
Right. I think, I was first introduced to the idea of civil services at a very young age. My mother inculcated in me the habit of reading the newspaper every day. So I think it was in fourth standard or something. I was going through the newspaper, and that year Mona Pruthi ma'am had topped the civil services. And I felt really excited about that because it was a woman topping the most prestigious exam in the country. And I asked my mother, what do these civil servants exactly do? And I think she gave me a basic idea. And over the years, as I kept on reading the newspapers, I understood that civil servants have a very important role to play in society, and they can be active agents of social change, if they so wish to contribute to the nation. So I think that's when I decided, the idea started forming that I wanted to take the examination. In 11th and 12th, I took humanities, and after that, I had decided to pursue history in my graduation years from St. Stephen's. So I think, throughout the years, especially in my college years, the idea basically solidified, and my resolve to take the exam right after my graduation became stronger. So I think it was a decision that had, the idea had been in my head for a really long time, but the decision to, seriously prepare for the examination came after my college ended.
Wow, that's inspiring, ma'am. So the next question, as there's a myth that history being too vast tends to get you less scores. So what made you take history as an optional, and what are the pros and cons of this subject?
Right. I think I've always had an interest in history ever since I was a child. So, and I wanted to pursue history at a graduation level as well. So the interest for the subject was always there. And since I had graduated in history, I think it was but natural for me to pursue it as an optional as well. Even for those who haven't pursued history as their graduation subject, I think it's still a really interesting optional to take. You're right about the fact that it's slightly vast, but at the same time it covers a lot of GS1 syllabus, gives you interesting ideas for your essay paper, and even certain sections of the GS4 as well. Look at the model makers; they are covered.
No problem, ma'am.
Yeah. So where was I? I just lost my train of thought. Uh, yeah, even for those who haven't studied history at their graduation level, I think history is a very interesting option to take, because not only does it help you prepare your optional, it overlaps a lot with the GS1 paper, and even with the essay section, and even with your GS4 paper, like I said. And I think as a civil servant also, it sort of widens your perspective. So not only will it help you in clearing the examination, I think in your career as well, you really need to understand where you're coming from so as to chart a course for the future. So if you're better able to understand your past, I think you will be better able to design a future strategy for the country. So I think that way, I feel history, it has one major con, that is the vastness of the subject. But other than that, I think in terms of keeping your interest alive while studying for the UPSC examination, I think history is very interesting. And since this examination is so torturous and it can get really mind numbing at times, I think history will never bore you. So I think that's why I would recommend people take history as their optional.
Okay, ma'am, that's helpful. So, would you like to tell our audience about your strategy and book list for history optional?
Right. So I'll begin with the book list first. My book list was fairly concise. If we look at ancient India, then I followed R.S. Sharma, which was like a basic book. I think everyone should read that book just to have a basic chronology sorted in their head. And not only will it help you for your GS and your GS mains and your prelims section, it will also help you in clearing the basics of history. After you're done with R.S. Sharma, I think one must definitely read Professor Upinder Singh's book, which is as comprehensive as it gets for the ancient India and early medieval section. Now, if we move on to the medieval India section, Professor Satish Chandra's book is, I think, very comprehensive. And if you look at modern India, I read Bipin Chandra. I read his book again for the basic chronology and just understanding the events as they took place. And beyond that, I built on it by reading Sekhar Bandyopadhyay's From Plassey to Partition. For modern India, I referred to Norman Lowe, Jain and Mathur, and self-study history. And beyond all these sources that I've mentioned, I also referred here and there to IGNOU BA notes and my own graduation notes. I think there are a lot of gaps that are not that you can't fill from these books, the basic books that I mentioned. So I think IGNOU BA notes, certain internet sources like self-study history, and even my own graduation notes were quite helpful for me in that sense. As far as the strategy for history goes, is I think first and foremost, I think a lot of people are confused as to how to make notes for the history optional. So I think what one must do for the optional or for the GS subjects that they are taking up, always go through the past year question papers as well as the syllabus. Ideally, you should remember the syllabus or have it pasted in front of your desk so that you can refer to it from time to time. So after you've read the syllabus for the optional and you've referred to the previous year question papers, they're all available. Refer at max to past 5-year papers, I would say, and then read the particular topic from the books that I have referred. Once you're done with the reading, then make notes, and whenever you're making notes, try to always look at the particular historical period from at least 3 perspectives. Look at the polity, look at the economy, and look at the society. When you're looking at the economy, automatically then you can look at the trade, you can look at agriculture, manufacturing, and all of those activities. When you're looking at society, then you have to look at class relations, gender relations, caste relations, and then also you have to look at the religion of the period, what was happening in religious developments. And also when you're looking at society, I think there's a trend, especially in the history section, that a lot of questions tend to be asked from art and culture. So I think, again, art and culture has become very important. And whenever you're making notes for the optional, art and culture is important. I think that is the first facet of my strategy, as I would put it. And the second important facet, I think, of my strategy while I was writing answers or I was studying any topic was that I would always focus on historiography. So whenever you're explaining a historical event, you're explaining a historical process, always try to, write about the scholars who've given their perspectives in understanding that particular event. So you can just write one or two lines from each scholar, but whenever you're explaining a historical event, for instance, you're explaining the decline of Harappan civilization, then there's so many scholars who've given their perspectives on it, such as Shireen Ratnagar, R.S. Sharma has given his own perspective. If you look at other scholars such as George Dales, he has given his own perspective. So there are multiple scholars who've tried explaining a particular event. So the same is the case for multiple other events in Indian history or world history. So wherever possible, try to incorporate the views of these scholars in writing your answer. I think these are the two important facets of my strategy for history optional. Beyond that, I think maps are really important for history. So I think for that one should refer to, I have also shared my list of maps on my blog. Beyond that, one can also refer to GS course, self-study history, whatever they wish. They have comprehensive maps. I think the most comprehensive refer definitely to test series. You should take at least 2 test series if you can. If not 2, then 1 for sure, because you have to learn how to write in a stressful situation in a time-bound manner. And I think that is only possible if you take 1 or 2 test series. So I think that concludes my strategy and book list for history optional.
Okay. I really hope you have noted it down, guys. But nonetheless, we'll make a list and we'll upload it on a page too. So, yeah. Ma'am, can you brief us about history paper 1 and paper 2 as to how to go about it?
Right. So I think if you look at the ancient India paper, the paper 1, so paper 1 has ancient India and medieval India. So if you look at ancient India, the first section has maps, as I mentioned, and for maps, it consists of 50 marks, and it's a pretty scoring section. You have to identify the sites that are marked on the question paper, and you have to write about 30 to 40 words about each of these sites. I think this is a fairly easy section because if you've prepared about a comprehensive list of at least about 100 sites, I think you will be sorted in this section, and there is not much to worry here. After you're sorted with the first question, I think you have to attempt compulsorily 1 question from the ancient India section and 1 question compulsorily from the medieval section. I think in ancient India, like I mentioned, the focus today continues to be on economy and society. Political narratives and political history has sort of declined in the past 5 years. That's the trend I have noticed. And I also focused more on the society aspect as well as the economy aspect. So even if you look at the past year paper, there was a question regarding Ashokan Dhamma, whether it was a tool of political aggrandizement. So even though it talks about political aggrandizement, it discusses more about Ashokan Dhamma, which continues to be a social aspect, religion, right? So I think if you look at the last year's paper, I think you'll get a fair idea of how important the social and the economic aspect has become. I think moving on to the medieval section again, the first question, it's 5 questions, 5 sub-questions are there, and you have to attempt them all. They're of 10 marks each, and you have to write 150 words for each of these questions. So I think this is a fairly easy section, in my opinion. You just have to critically analyze these statements. Sometimes they tend to ask questions which are out of the box, out of the ordinary, or there are certain topics that you might not have, even looked at. For instance, last year they asked us about Sanskrit at the Mughal court. And I think it's a very, minute topic. No one actually even bothers to study that topic. So that way, I think, yeah. So people can be in kind of a fix. I also I had read one book by Audrey Touchke about culture of encounters, Sanskrit at the Mughal court, and I tried forming an answer on the basis of that reading, which I had done a long time ago. So I think if there's a question that that comes from a section that has never been asked or is very obscure, then everyone faces near about the same problem in that section. Beyond that, again, from medieval India, you compulsorily have to attempt one question. And what I have noticed is that earlier there used to be a lot of focus on the Mughal history, but now there's a focus on regional histories as well. So Vijayanagar kingdom has become quite important. Similarly, Malwa, Bahmani kingdom, and even if you look at Kashmiri rulers. So basically, I would say that there's a focus these days more on regional histories than just Mughal history. And I think it's now important to prepare yourself for these kind of questions as well. So I think that was pretty much it about the paper one. If you look at paper two, that's modern India and that's world history. So for modern India, again, the first question has 5 sub-questions, 10 marks each, 150 words you have to attempt. And they're basically you have to critically analyze certain statements. So, for instance, last year there was a question on railways in India, and you had to critically analyze it basically. And I think it was a fairly easy question because it just asked you whether railways were they constructed by the British for the economic growth of India, or was it only after independence that they were used for Indian economic growth. So I think these kind of questions, the critically analyzed questions, if you take enough test series and you prepare yourself for these kind of questions, they become very easy to handle. There's not much difficulty. Beyond that, I think in the modern India section, the movements such as the non-cooperation movement, Swadeshi movement, the civil disobedience movement, the Quit India movement, all these important movements from the Indian struggle for independence, they continue to be important to this date. And I think one has to be well versed with these movements. Secondly, I also feel that there's a lot of emphasis on constitutional developments in the British period in India, and one has to obviously be well versed with that as well. I think if we look at the world history section, again, the first question is a compulsory one, and you have to attempt the 5 sub-questions that come with it, 10 marks each and 150 words. And again, these are critically analyzed statements. They're fairly straightforward, but world history, I think in the past few years has become out of the box, and you can't really predict anything in this section. So I feel, the candidate is in a bit of a fix, and they should look at the past year papers to gain a fair idea of what can be the probable questions. World history is definitely vast, but you have to prepare yourself for it because it's a compulsory section as well. Looking at the other questions, if we look at other world history questions, I think there are certain topics that continue to be important even to this day, such as industrialization, the world wars, Enlightenment, the Enlightenment period. So I think these are some of the important topics that the candidates can definitely focus on. But what I've also noticed is that the UPSC is now focusing more on history of South Asia, Southeast Asia as well. So I think these are certain topics that the candidates must begin picking up and start preparing on their own.
Okay, ma'am.
So I think that would be my explanation for the 2 papers.
Yeah. So moving on to the next one. If we look at the general trends of history in prelims, we observe that there is a greater share of ancient and medieval history in these recent past exams in comparison to the modern history. So, ma'am, what are your comments on it?
I think modern history continues to be important. I think if we combine ancient and medieval India, I think then you'll get the equal number of questions with modern India. I think it's a fair divide between the two. But I think medieval India, in my opinion, has started, becoming more important in the past few years. Earlier, I think it was very minute and no one really bothered to study it also. But I think medieval India is becoming important. And I also feel that, the readings that we used to do for the ancient, medieval, and the modern section. Earlier, we used to just refer to the old NCRTs by R.S. Sharma, Satish Chandra, Bipin Chandra, and read Spectrum. I think now there's a greater focus on reading the new NCRTs as well. So one has to read the new NCRTs from 6th to 8th, as well as the 12th grade NCRT as well. Because if you look at a lot of questions that were asked this year per se, they tended to be from the newer NCRTs. For instance, if you look at the Pratihara, Pallava question, you had to arrange them in the chronological order in the prelims paper this year. Right, so I think that is probably from the new 6th class NCRT, if I'm not mistaken. And even there was a question about the Munda revolt, Ulgulan, which revolt is associated with the term Ulgulan. So I think that is also from the 12th class NCRT, modern India NCRT. So I think UPSC is trying to make it a little bit difficult for the candidates, and this trend has sort of continued from, I think, yeah, it's continued, I think, from 2018. I think it began in 2018 when they started shifting the focus from the basic readings that one had to do, and it became more focused on other, books. And I also feel that if we look at the ancient India section, it tends also to focus on Buddhism and Jainism, and their sects as well. So I feel that, and this trend, I think, has continued again for the past few years. They used to ask whether this particular sect belongs to which religion and all of that. So I think, again, one has to be aware of the different sects of, Buddhism and Jainism. And I feel that even though I think UPSC is trying to make it difficult, I think candidates have realized by last year. I think there was a realization that the focus now has shifted from the basic readings of R.S. Sharma and Satish Chandra and Bipin Chandra.
Okay, ma'am. So next, what are your opinions about covering world history for mains?
Right. I think someone who hasn't taken history as an optional, for them covering world history for mains is it's a very tedious task. Yeah, exactly. Because I feel, there's a very low cost benefit analysis, because sometimes there are very few questions that, there's one question barely that comes from world history, and sometimes you can't even predict the type of questions. Like last year in GS, they asked very straightforward questions about the French Revolution, about the American Revolution, and all of that. And I think these are topics that candidates have been preparing. But if you look at the years before that, they asked strange questions about the Malaya Peninsula and the partition of that. So, right. So I think there is no one particular trend that, a candidate can follow in the world history section for GS1. But if one has to do the bare minimum also for world history, I think they should definitely focus on French history, French Revolution per se, and they have to, I think, definitely look at American Revolution, American Civil War, the Industrial Revolution. They can also definitely look at the world wars, rise of fascism in Germany, Italy, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution as they took place. I think these are the few important topics that a candidate can pick and choose from the history optional syllabus to prepare for the GS1 paper for world history.
Okay, ma'am. So now let's move to our prelims 2020 history analysis.
Right.
Ma'am, what you have to say about all those history questions that appeared this year and made the aspirants think really very hard?
Right. I think history, if you look at this year's paper, and if you combine art and culture along with ancient, medieval, and modern India, I think it had the highest number of questions, about 19 or 20, if I'm not mistaken. And I think history has become really important if you, see the past year few trends. So I think if we look at the questions, first and foremost, art and culture, as always, continues to be completely out of the box. You really can't predict this section. You can just, read your basic sources. You can read Nitin Singhania and you can read your ancient India texts very carefully, but there's no way that you can predict the kind of questions that they're asking for art and culture these days. I think everyone is in the same boat as far as art and culture goes. So if you think that you haven't done well in art and culture, then that's the case with each and every every person who's appearing for that section, who's appearing for the paper in that section. And I also feel that I think the people who have taken history as their optional, they'll have only a slight advantage over the other students, because art and culture, like I said, even for a history optional student, continues to be out of the box. Then again, if you look at the other questions, if you look at ancient India, if you look at medieval India, if you look at modern India, UPSC has realized that, all the students have understood the basic sources, that is the 11th and 12th old NCRTs and the Spectrum book, and they are trying to make it difficult for the candidates. And like I said, it's a trend that has continued for the past 2-3 years now, and it's increased, I feel. I think, some of the questions that I saw for history optional, I just knew them. For the history section in the prelims paper, I just knew them because I had taken history as my optional, and not, if there's a student who doesn't have history as an optional, I can see them facing difficulties in this section. So I feel that, and because if you look at certain questions, if you look at the questions, especially on Buddhism, the two questions I think there was one on paramitas, and I think the other one I don't remember clearly. But there was another question, I think, on on Buddhism and the various sects under it. I think if you look at these questions, you have to be reading books such as Upinder Singh to answer these kind of questions. And Upinder Singh is the book, I think, which only history optional students refer to. I don't think a lay student has the time or energy or even the desire to read Upinder Singh. So I think that way history has definitely become tougher, and I honestly don't know a way to tackle it for a general student. I think they have to, if they are not reading books such as Upinder Singh, then they have to really look at the 6th to 8th old NCRTs. That would help them to a certain extent while they're tackling the history questions. And beyond that, I think the 12th NCRT, especially for the modern India paper, modern India section, I felt that the 12th NCRT, the new one, would be really helpful if they are tackling that section. For instance, if you look at the indigo, I think there was a question on the decline of indigo production in India. I think if one's read the 12th NCRT, they can answer it easily. And beyond that, I think there are certain questions which no one has any clue about. For instance, they wanted the students to match the place with the state, and I think even I, knew only I could match only one, and with the method of elimination also, it becomes very confusing to get to the right answer. So I feel that you can definitely try eliminating the wrong options, and you can definitely reach the last option. But I also feel that for that, even to reach that stage, even to eliminate other options, you have to be reading a lot more for history than was required earlier. So I think in my earlier live sessions or in my earlier interviews for history for prelim section, I would only recommend the old NCRTs, 11th and 12th NCRTs, as well as the new 12th grade NCRTs if someone had the time. But now looking at this paper, this prelims paper, I would definitely recommend reading 6 to 8 NCRTs, the new ones, definitely, because there's a lot of questions that were taken directly, I feel, in my opinion, from there, as well as the and I would also again recommend reading the old ones. Obviously, one can't let go of those as well, and you have to read the 12th grade history NCRT. So I think the sources and from which the UPSC is asking these history questions have increased, and a candidate has to be now prepared for all kinds of questions that UPSC may ask.
Ma'am, there's also a question popping up that according to you, the paper of 2020, was it easy, moderate, or difficult?
I think, I only had the opportunity to look at the history section. I did look at a few other questions here and there, but I didn't look at it in depth. I just looked at it, just saw it, just went through the paper. I think it was fairly, balanced, I would say. I think it was slightly on the difficult side, definitely, but I think, this increasing difficulty levels have been going on, since a batch before me. So I think the 2018 paper, that's when they they began making the paper actually really tough. And then I think my paper, my year's prelims paper also, I think it was on the same difficulty levels. And I think this year also the difficulty level that way hasn't changed that much from last year's or the year before that. But I think if you compare this paper to maybe 2016, 2017, then in that sense, yes, the difficulty has definitely increased.
Okay, ma'am. The next one, would you please give us some tips and tricks for UPSC mains answer writing?
Right. I think the best tip or trick for UPSC answer writing, first of all, is to take test series and practice answer writing at home as well as at the test series as far as possible, because of two reasons. You need to finish the paper in the exam hall, and without taking these test series, your speed will not increase, and you will end up leaving a large section, a large chunk of your paper eventually in the mains examination. I think first and foremost, I would say that take test series and start practicing answer writing. Secondly, if we look at answer writing even, I think what needs to be done is, first of all, make your answer interesting, add, an X factor, add some oomph to your answer. And I think the best way to do that is by relating the answer to current affairs. So try giving as many current affair examples as possible in your answer, and try relating the question to a current affair situation if possible. Secondly, I think what one can also do is add statistics to one's answer to make it seem original, and to also make it, make the reader be a little more engrossed in reading your answer. So I think statistics and current affairs are the two ways in which you can increase your marks in the mains examination. I think other than that, following a definite structure to your answers is very important. You have to have an introduction, and whenever you're writing an introduction, always write an introduction first and foremost. And secondly, try to make it short. Don't make it more than 3-4 lines. Just write the basic definition of whatever term is being asked in the question, or if if it's been in the news recently, just write that in the introduction, or you can give a certain example, or you can quote a constitutional article if it's a GS2 paper. So just in 2 to 3 lines, you have to provide an introduction. When you move to the body, try to explain the problem or the question that is asked from different perspectives. So try making the examiner look at it from a historical, political, legal, economic, social perspective. As many degrees of analysis as you can provide, the better for you. And always try to look at the negatives and the positives if asked in the question. And once you're concluding, always try to provide a way forward and try to end on a positive note, I would say. And secondly, what I would also recommend is that if you're providing a way forward, and if you know any recommendation from a government report, try to incorporate that in your way forward. So you can give a recommendation from the second ARC reports or any other report that hasn't even been in the news recently. Maybe it's an old report that you would like to cite, but that's also still fine. You can always quote a report and provide a way forward. So I think besides, like I said, statistics, current affairs, reports are an interesting way to get a little more marks. And again, I think you have to be citing constitutional articles wherever possible. And beyond that, I think if you can draw maps, I used to draw a lot of maps in my answers wherever possible. Don't go overboard with it. Don't draw a map for each and every answer that you find, or a diagram for each and every answer that you find. But yes, definitely try drawing diagrams, maps, and always label the diagram properly. Always, if there are features in the diagram that may not be explained easily, you always label them. Always write figure 1, so that when you're writing the answer, you can say, oh, as stated in figure 1. I think that would be a fairly good strategy. And I think beyond that, one can always make flow charts if possible. Again, don't go overboard with the flow charts. Always make a flow chart if you think that it will save time. First of all, because in writing an entire thing, writing an entire paragraph, it takes up a lot of time. So flow chart, firstly, it should save time. And secondly, you should be able to better explain whatever you're going to write in a paragraph in the form of a flow chart. So write shorter sentences, but ensure that the examiner can understand it. So I think these are my basic tips for improving your answer writing for the mains exam.
That was really helpful, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have covered almost all the questions, but if you have any still, so please drop in the comment section below. We are waiting. Meanwhile, ma'am, I would like to tell you about our ongoing program of current affairs, wherein we compile and amalgamate the important current issues and facts from the Hindu, the Indian Express, PIB, and all government websites at a minimal cost of rupee 1 per day, which means rupees 365 an year. And the amount we get, 65% of it is donated to the needy students for their further education. So yeah, we believe in serving and uplifting people. Also, we have a Telegram group for providing study material related to UPSC at no cost. The best part about this group is that serving officers are a part of it to provide the microscopic guidance. So the link for the same is present in the bio of this page, that is Guide IAS. To know more, all the interested viewers can message us. Our team will approach you within 24 hours. Any questions?
I think there are a lot of questions that are popping up now. I think few of them are about how to begin preparation in college.
Yeah.
Right. So, college preparation tips. I think first and foremost, please focus on your college subject, your graduation subject. I did not prepare specifically for the civil services examination while I was in college. I rather focused on my graduation subject because I knew it was going to be my optional, and that's why I wanted to do well in my graduation years as well. So, I think first and foremost, if your graduation subject, even if it's not going to be your optional, still focus on doing that subject properly. Secondly, inculcate the habit of reading newspapers as early as you can in your college years only, and try understanding what sections of the newspaper are important from the UPSC point of view and what sections aren't important, and just try and start reading the Hindu as early as possible in your college years. I think beyond that, try enjoying college life as such. I would say take part in extracurricular activities. I think because what is also important is an overall personality development. Holistic development is important, and I think extracurricular activities for that very reason are essential to your college life. I think beyond that, if you feel that you are particularly weak in the NCRTs and you wish to secure your basis at least, so I think you could begin your NCRT preparation from second year of college if you wish to, and start reading NCRTs because you have a lot of time. You have second year, your third year, and probably if you're taking a year off as well. So for that very reason, I think you should begin reading NCRTs right from the 6th standard ones. Read the 6th to 10th NCRTs and then look at the 11th and 12th grade NCRTs as well as far as possible. And I think that is a fair strategy for your college years.
So yeah, that answers your question, whosoever has asked. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Just wait for a minute or two. So I think so we have already answered most of the questions so far.
Ethics paper sources, someone's asking.
Yeah.
Right. I think for ethics, it's a very interesting paper. So for that, I think you can refer to any material that is available, in the markets. You can refer to Vajiram notes. You can refer to lexicon. It doesn't really matter. What matters more than just reading these notes is you have your own definition of the terms that are given in the syllabus. So for transparency, for probity, for all these terms, you should have your own definition. And a lot of toppers have uploaded their own notes. You can refer to their notes as well, but try explaining all these terms that are given in the ethics section, in the ethics paper, in your own words, because the simpler you make the examiner understand them, the examiner will realize that you've not simply crammed these terms, rather you've understood these terms, and that is the point of the ethics section. Beyond that, I think if you look at sections like moral philosophers, you could always refer to YouTube channels such as the School of Life. I've recommended that multiple times, and I think it's a very interesting YouTube channel because it explains the teachings and the philosophies of the various moral thinkers and philosophers such as Nietzsche, Rousseau, Kant, in about 8 to 10 minute videos, and you can make your own short notes from those videos. I think these were my basic sources. I also refer to Vajiram and Ravi's notes for ethics, but at the end of the day, you always have to make your own personal notes so that you are able to understand the term easily. I think when you're also writing your own definitions for these terms, what is also important is that you provide certain examples from the lives of famous people, famous leaders such as Mother Teresa, such as Mahatma Gandhi, all of these people. Their examples from their lives can really enrich your answer. And secondly, a second type of example that you must also write for your own reference is an example from your own life, because that sort of personalizes that particular value for the examiner, and he will understand that you have learnt not only the meaning of the word that you're trying to explain, but also its implementation in day-to-day life. So I think that has to be done. Beyond that, if you look at section B for case studies, I think the only way to get better at case studies is to practice as many case studies as possible. That's what I did, and so you have to take test series for that, or you can begin practicing at home as well.
Ma'am, there's also a question popping up. The students who have given prelims this year and they could not perform that good, so they should continue preparing for mains, or what should they actually do now? Very confused.
Right. Right. I think, after taking a week-long break, I think you should firstly analyze the sections in which, they could not do so well, and keep that aside. Analyze the paper very well for a day, take a day out and analyze the paper really well, and then keep it aside. Then you should begin your mains preparation, or rather I should say an integrated preparation for prelims and mains, and continue that till the next year's prelims, when like 3 or 4 months are left. Then you can again begin focusing on your prelims. Now, the analysis of the paper that you did and you figured out your weak areas, when you're taking your mock tests again, when you're preparing for the prelims again, look at these weak areas and figure out how to improve in these weak areas, and this should be the focus of your preparation when about 4 or 3 months are left for the prelims. I think that would be a fair strategy.
Thank you, ma'am. So yeah, before we part ways, Guide IAS reminds you that you all have the superpowers. You deserve to be successful. We believe in you and your strengths. So never give up and keep searching the inner why in you. I want to say a massive thank you to Chandrajyoti Singh. Thank you so much, ma'am, for marking this spectacular evening with your glorious presence. We are humbled and grateful for the enthusiasm our audience has shown up. Thank you so much for connecting with us. Thank you so much, ma'am. Have an amazing sleep tonight. Take care, everyone. I'll see you in the next. Goodbye till then. Goodbye, ma'am.
Thank you. Goodbye.